Hey folks, so I was asked if I could cut a decoration for a kid's room. More specifically, I was asked if I could cut this file out of a piece of wood that is about 3 feet long, 3 feet by 1 foot. Now, my machine is not this large, and so this project is too big to fit on the bed of my machine and cut in one piece. So I thought this would be a great project to show you a couple of newer features in LightBurn that can make it easier for you to cut up projects and execute things that are larger than your laser bed. So there are a couple of parts to this. The first part is going to be taking this file and cutting it into the multiple sections needed so that each section is small enough to fit on your laser. And then the next part is aligning those sections so that you can make this look like it was all cut in one piece. And so to do the cutting, we're going to use a new tool in LightBurn called Cut Shapes. And the Cut Shapes tool acts remarkably like a cookie cutter. And so what I mean by that is you have a shape like this that is your cutter. You have a shape like this that is the thing you want cut. And similar to the Boolean tools, you select both, you go Tools, Cut Shapes, and it doesn't look like it did anything, but LightBurn has actually broken this out into two pieces. One which is everything that was outside of the cutter, and one that is everything that was inside the cutter. And so if I was to make 3 squares, each one basically a panel that I want, I can use those squares to cut the project up into the pieces that are small enough that will fit on my machine. The next part of this is going to be aligning the different cuts so that they come out correctly. And for that, we're going to use the print and cut feature in LightBurn, which lets you register a cut to a set of registration marks. And so in order to make this all work, we're going to put some registration marks in this project. And when we cut out one section, it will emit a couple of registration marks along with it. And then we'll use those to line up the next section with the previous one. And we'll show how all of that ties together as we do this. So let's get going. Now the artwork that I have right now is set to fill. However, because this is going to be a cutout, I'm going to change it to line. I just had it in fill mode so that you could see how things looked. This is not the scale that we need yet. We actually need a template here just as a starting point. So I'm going to create a rectangle and type 3 feet by 1 foot. And so that is the ultimate size that this is going to be. I'm going to select my mermaid. I'm going to select my wood template and hit align centers to move this into the middle. Deselect everything, select just the mermaid, and then hold the control key as I drag this so that it drags from the center, and scale it to be roughly the size that I'm going to want when I'm done here. So I want a little bit of room on either side so that I have some room to make mistakes, but overall this looks about right. I think the sizing here is basically correct. This is what I want. So now we have to cut this into 3 different sections. You'll notice I'm going to group this quickly. Using the greater than and less than keys, I can rotate 90 degrees in either direction. So my machine has pass-through doors on the front and rear. If you had a machine with pass-through doors on the side, you could do this in 2 sections, just halves, like this. Mine has them in front and back, and with my laser bed, I don't have enough space to cut this in halves. I'm going to have to actually do it in 3 sections. So the tail, the middle, and then the head. So to do that, let me ungroup this again. I need 3 cutting boxes effectively. One for the tail section, one for the midsection, one for the head. Technically, you don't need to do them all. You can do every other one, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So I'm just going to break this into 3 sections that are each 1 foot by 1 foot. So again, we're going to create a box. I'm going to type 1 foot by 1 foot. I have the aspect lock turned off. If I did not have the aspect lock turned off, it would scale this box to be locked when I scaled it, and I'll show you what I mean by that. If you dragged something out that was not the correct shape and you have the aspect lock turned on, if I type 3 feet here, it will make this the same shape with the new scale that I chose, and that's obviously not correct. I want 1 foot by 1 foot, like that. So I've just created 2 little boxes. I'm going to make these a different color. So we'll make our cutters red just because. Now I'm going to line these up so that one of these boxes is at the front end here and one of them is at the back end here. And to do that, I'm going to click this corner of this box and you'll see that my cursor changes shape to a crosshair. That's telling me that it's snapping to that corner node. So when I grab it, I'm now dragging from that exact corner. And if I get near something else, LightBurn will snap it to that thing. So in this case, I'm dragging it near this other corner of this large template rectangle I have. And so LightBurn has snapped the cutting shape to match. And I'm going to do the other one from the other corner so that I can snap it to here. So grabbing here, drag to there. So now I have my rough layout, and then I've got a cutting shape on this end and a cutting shape on this end, and then whatever's left is in the middle. I'm also going to create registration marks. And so what I mean by that is we need a way for the print and cut feature to have something for me to line it up with. Print and cut just lets you specify a target shape. So I can draw pretty much anything. It could be a circle like this. You just need something that you have a center point that you can align your red dot pointer up with. And now a circle doesn't have a center point that's visible. So what we're going to do instead is make one. I'm going to make one a little smaller. First of all, we'll just make these 10 millimeters. I'm going to draw a line. Now, again, using the snaps, when I get to this top edge or side edge, a circle is actually 4 arcs that start at the north, east, south, and west points. And so I can draw a straight line from the top to the bottom, and then I can draw a straight line from the left to the right, and they're nice and horizontal, and they make a nice, perfect little cross. Select the whole thing and group it. Normally I use Control-G to group, but this is the button for it. Now, we want these crosshairs to be a different color again. I'm going to make them green, and I'm going to drag this to this snapping point here so that it's right on that corner, and then I'm just going to use my cursor arrow to move it down by 1 step so that it's just in from the wood, because we actually do have to engrave this on the material that we're cutting so we can see it. So I'm going to copy that shape and paste one down here and snap it to that corner, move it up. Paste one over here, snap it to that corner and move it up. Paste one up here, snap it here, move it down. So now I have marks on each of these corners here, basically where my cuts are going to get split. So the way that the print and cut feature works, you create registration marks like this, either on something that you are printing or something that you are sending to your laser. And then you use those same marks later to register a different thing or a different cut to these marks. So what we're going to do is run this part of the job here on the laser and send these marks with it so they get drawn by the laser wherever they end up. Then when we do the next section, this middle section here, we're going to use those 2 marks that got emitted with the previous section and tell this section to use these to line them up with. Now, it sounds a lot more complicated than it is, and when you actually see it in practice, it's quite simple to do. So don't panic yet. We have to cut up our project. So to do that, we're going to use these red shapes that we used or we created to be our cutters. So the first thing we do is select the mermaid. Then we select the cutting tool. We go to Tools, Cut Shapes, and it's done. Again, it doesn't look like it did anything, but it actually has segmented the job, and you can see we have this little pokey bit sticking out here. This here has split everything off into its own group, and I can move this just using the cursor keys. And it lines up perfectly so that when it's not selected, you can't actually tell that it's done anything. And then the rest of the project is over here in this second piece. So now we have to repeat the process to cut this section off. So again, I'm going to select the mermaid. I'm going to select my cutting tool, go to Tools, Cut Shapes, and now I have the next piece. So there's the head, there's the midsection, and here's the tail. So we have our project now cut into 3 sections, and we have these small registration marks created for it. So this is pretty much ready to go. The things we're going to have to be careful of are getting this lined up on the machine properly, getting these marks sent correctly, and so on. So what I'm going to do is break this into 3 distinct files so that I don't make a mistake basically when I'm sending it. First of all, pressing the greater than key, rotate it 90 degrees so that this is now vertical, which is the way my machine needs it. I'm going to feed it through from the tail, then the midsection, then the head. So I'm going to do the tail as the first part of the project. I'm going to save this as mermaid. So we're going to call this one page 1. I'm going to do it again for page 2. And then I'm going to do it again for page 3. Now I'm going to go back and edit these so that the individual pages are correct. I also haven't set up my power and speeds correctly yet. We're going to have to do that as well, and it would have been easier if I did that to begin with. I'll go back and clean that up. So the first file is going to be the tail section. And so for that, we're going to delete everything except these. So I'm going to save this as page 1. So this tail is going to get cut, and it's going to send these 2 engraving crosshairs with it. Now these are just set to line. I've got these set to fairly high speed, fairly low power. This is the tail cutout itself, and this has relatively high speed with lots of power. I'm actually going to need to change this. So we'll do this at, say, 15 millimeters a second, 80% power. That's probably accurate for my system. And then the line cuts, just to do the engraving marks, those are fine as they are. Now, you could, and you probably would want to, save out a template to show you where the wood should go. So what I'm likely to want to do is remove all of these other parts and then just pull this up a little bit. So we're still on page 1 here. I will save this. So this now is a piece or an outline that I can use to show me where the wood should go. So when I load my sheet into the machine, if I frame, it's going to show me this exact outline, and that's going to help me line up the wood for the first cut before I start feeding the others through. It's important to get this lined up well enough so that you have room if you kind of go off a little bit while you're doing your cuts. The print and cut alignment is going to make sure that the cut itself is aligned. But if I had the wood arranged funny to begin with, so for example, if my wood was placed into the machine like this, it wouldn't be lined up correctly as I fed the project through. It would, go off the side of that wood. And so that would be bad. By including a little template like this, at least for the first cutting file, I have a good idea of where the wood needs to go or land on the machine bed to line this all up. So I'm not going to engrave this at full power. I'm actually not going to engrave it at all. We'll set this to be 100 speed and say 3% power, just so that it basically does nothing. And we'll save that. So I'm going to open up the next page of the mermaid file, which is this one, and move everything up by one section. Now, for this part, I do not need the tail. I do not need the body. I also do not need that. I only need the middle section that I'm going to be cutting, and I need to make sure that this is set at the same speed and power that I had in the other layers, or in the other files, pardon me. So 15 and 80, and we'll set min power to be 30 for no particular reason. And the crosshairs are fine. Now, we have crosshairs in the other file that are here and here. These ones are going to engrave as well. That's fine. They should just engrave right over top of the other ones. These ones are the important ones. These are going to be new for this file. So when we run this on the machine, it's going to engrave this mark and this mark over the ones that we already have that were part of the other, or the first part of the job. And then it's going to engrave these ones new so that we can line up the next part of the job. And then obviously it's going to run the rest of the cut as well. So we'll save this, and then we'll open up the third page of our project. And this is the final step. We'll position that about there. Now for this one, we don't need anything but the head and then these two marks, which we're going to align to. So again, these two marks will have been output already by the previous stage, by the previous file, and we're using the presence of these two to line up this next piece of the cut, and we'll show how that works in a moment when we actually do the cutting. So I'm going to go back and just quickly spot check everything that I've done so far, and then we'll head over to the machine and start cutting. So the first section of this is pretty easy. Now I have loaded the file into the machine. It's in my controller. I've placed the wood just to give you an idea of where it's going to go. If I hit the frame button, either in LightBurn or on the machine, it does this. It follows the path of my wood. And so that is framed fairly well. So we're going to run this first cut, and then we'll show how to do the registration with the second half while we're using the pass-through. So while this is engraving, you can see the two registration marks have already been put down, and it's running through the cuts. Can't tell yet if it's actually going through or not. This is wood that I have not cut before, so I may have to go back over this and do it a second time. Not a big deal. So after running a quick second pass, everything has properly cut out, and you can see that my two registration marks, one here and one here, are quite visible. I've got my pass-through door open, so let's do the fun part, aligning the next part of the file with this one. So, first thing you do is pick this up carefully and feed it in. Now, I'm going to do this in a way that hopefully makes my life just a little bit easier. I'm going to manually line up my red dot pointer with the first mark as just how I'm placing the wood. Now, you don't have to do this. There's no requirement that you do this, but it makes it a little bit quicker if you do it like this. So, this is the important part. We're going to point the red dot, and you can see it there glowing in the middle, at this crosshair. We're going to select this same crosshair in the project in LightBurn, and tell LightBurn to align where the machine is right now with where that red dot or where that crosshair is in the project. And then we're going to go over to this one and do the same thing. We'll jog the laser over to this point here, and then we'll tell LightBurn this is the second crosshair while having that second crosshair selected in the project. And in that way, LightBurn will be able to align the next part so that it connects perfectly here. So we'll go to the machine. I'll show you how to align this target in LightBurn. We'll do that next. So I've loaded the next part of this project. This and this are the two, or this marker up here and this one over here, are the two markers that were output by the previous section of the project. So if you remember, the tail of the mermaid is up here somewhere, and there were two crosshair marks that were output with that job. So the one that I currently have the laser pointed at is this one. And so in order to tell LightBurn how to align this part of the job with the previous part, we select this crosshair, we go to Tools, Print and Cut, and we say Set First Target Position. Now when you select this, LightBurn reads the current position of the laser head, and it looks at the position of what you have selected, and it records both. And so when I say Print and Cut, Set First Target Position, nothing really seems to have happened. If I go back and look at that menu, you can see that this first option here is now highlighted. There's a little blue square, so it's telling me that that first marker position is now valid. So now we have to line up the second target. So on the laser itself, I jog the red dot pointer to point at the second target marker, this one. As accurately as I can, point the red dot pointer right at the dead center of this crosshair. I go to Tools, Print and Cut, Set Second Target Position, and when I click this, you'll notice that LightBurn now says Print and Cut here in the laser window. And if I go up to the Tools menu and I open up the Print and Cut menu, you can see the first, second, and third entries all have a little blue highlight next to them. So that's telling me that my first target position is valid, my second target position is valid, and it's aligning the output to the targets. Now it enabled this automatically for me. As long as you have valid targets, you can align your output to those targets. If I want to turn the Print and Cut feature off, I just click this entry again, and it goes away over here. I haven't changed my target markers yet, so I can go back here and turn this back on without any problem. I could also, if my alignment wasn't correct or it framed wrong or something, go back and reselect my targets and redo the process. But effectively, by selecting this marker and this marker, with the laser pointed at each of them and using the Print and Cut feature, LightBurn has figured out exactly where to position the output on the laser so that this cut will now line up with the one before it. And so I'm going to send this file to the laser and we'll run it. So this is still lined up with the previous target marker right there. That's the original one, the first one that we did. I've loaded the file into the laser, so when I hit frame, it should frame just on the outside of that marker, and then the two that are going to go at the bottom here. It's not going to frame the mermaid exactly because there are 4 target markers that you can see in the corners of the job. So one up there, one down there, and so on. But the frame should go on the outside of this mark and this mark at the very least. And so when we frame, you'll see that happen. That looks good, so I'm going to close the lid and run the job. Alright, so we're at the first kind of critical part of this, where you can see that line right up there has actually met the other part of the tail that was sent already. So if we move over here a little bit, you can see that it has lined up properly with the part that was already cut. And it'll continue to do that. So we'll come back to this as it finishes the job. Now if we zoom in a little bit, you can actually see a couple of spots. There's one about there, and one about, it's difficult for me to point my finger at the right spot while I'm holding the phone, but one about there, and then there's one there that are slightly dark, and that's because of where the machine began firing. It left a little splash of air there, so you can see a little bit of char where the endpoints lined up, but otherwise this is accurate and perfect. So this is how it looks with the second half done. And you can see, again, we've got our next set of target marks output on either side of the job here. These will be connected to the next piece when it does the final third. But the critical bit is up here by the tail, where right about there is the connection mark between the two jobs. So you can see a tiny little burn there, and one there, and that one's actually almost imperceptible, but these two are a little more visible. But those are where the two parts of the job were connected together, and it's just air assist splash or a little bit of smoke from the beginning of the cut. But you can see the alignment is perfect. It looks like it's one continuous piece. So now we're going to take the wood, slide it through, do the same registration procedure for the next part using these two target markers to line up the third part of the job, and we'll see what the final output looks like shortly. Alright, so I'm sliding the wood up here, getting it into position for the next cut, but I thought I would show, just to prove that this isn't some strange trickery that I'm doing. I'm going to arrange the wood in the machine like this. So you remember that the first two parts were very, very straight like that. They were lined up nice and straight in the machine. So for the last piece, I'm going to show you just how off you can be and twist it like that. And so I am going to jog my laser over to this first mark. You really want to slow it down when you get close. So you can either use LightBurn itself with the jog arrows to adjust in very, very, very small increments. I usually move 0.1 millimeters at a time to line up my target markers. Or on your Ruida control panel or whatever controller you're using, if you have one with a speed button, you can adjust the speed of movement down to the point where it's just crawling. So I've set this to 1 millimeter per second, and now I can jog very, very, very slowly. So you want the laser to be pointed at that center mark as accurately as you possibly can. So here I've loaded the third and final file. I've also put these two markers on their own layer and set them to 1% power output because I don't actually want these ones to burn. I don't need them to. I just need the markers so that I can tag them. So again, select this first marker, go to Tools, Print and Cut, set first target position to line it up with the selected marker on the laser. Then I jog the laser over to point at this second marker on the bed, select it, go to Tools, Print and Cut, set second target position. So now the second position target is set. And so even though this job is arranged nice and vertical here, and it's really, really slanted and rotated on the laser, you'll see that the output is registered correctly because we've used these two target markers to line everything up. So I'm going to send this file and run it on the laser, and we'll see what the finished product looks like. So I've sent the job to the machine, and as a quick check, you can actually see in the file preview that it shows you on the display that those two marks, that one and that one, are in approximately the same orientation as they are on the bed of the machine. So that's a good sign. You can tell that LightBurn has actually angled the job properly so that everything should line up. So I'm going to turn everything on and run this, and we'll see how it looks. So you can see pretty much immediately the first part of the job being sent has already connected to and is lined up with part of it that was already sent out. And that part just dropped, so it's perfectly lined up with what was sent before. You can see this piece is yet another that was sectioned in parts between this file and the previous file. And again, the cuts are nicely lined up. So this was a happy little accident, not really happy, but an accident nonetheless. While running the second pass, I had a piece, I think this piece right here, fall into the knife bed a little bit and poke up. So when this one was cut, it hopped back over to hit another cut, it caught this and pulled the machine with it. I think it was actually going to cut this shape here. But it bumped up against the piece of this that was stuck up and pulled the wood off to one side, misaligning all of the subsequent cuts that would follow it. So I went back to the computer, realigned the print and cut markers again with the position of the wood as it is now, and we're going to run the job one last time just to show you that even if you horribly screw up like I just did, you can probably salvage it using target marks and print and cut to align the output. So we'll close the lid here, set everything up, and hit go. So remember, this wood is slid about ½ an inch out of position from where it was when I did this last run, and yet you can see the beam grazing the insides of the edges that are already there as it goes around. So this is another example of how accurate the print and cut feature is. You're able to make a second pass over an existing project after you've moved it, as long as you can line everything up. Alright, so the job is finished. I'm ready to depanel it. And if you look, we now have one large continuous piece with no visible seam here, except for a couple of very, very minor little discolorations from the exhaust. There are, where is it now? On this end, there were a couple of spots there. If you look really closely there, you can see just a tiny little indent right there. And that's basically because I ran this 3 times, and so the beam width got a little wider there. But it was only because I screwed up having it catch that piece and pull the job out of alignment that was even necessary. Normally you would not be able to see those at all. There's another one right there, but they're basically invisible. And you may have, depending on the size of your laser and your exhaust and air assist and so on, you may have visible marks at the start and end of every cut. So this is not an unexpected result, but there's the finished product, and it's all one piece, and it's quite a bit larger than I could put in my laser by itself.